And now that Jak and Daxter's out of the way, we can dive into Jak II, where they changed up the formula for the gameplay.
I had gotten Jak and Daxter with my first PS2, but I left the system and game behind when I went off to college. I picked up a second PS2, but I wouldn't play Jak II until a few years after its initial release, when I picked up used copies of the trilogy around 2006. When I had the games in my possession, I played them all from start to finish and enjoyed every second of it, as each game was better than the last. Naughty Dog originally wasn't sure if they were going to make a sequel to Jak and Daxter. However, in that game, if you collected all the power cells, you would get a secret ending that sets up a sequel.
And I'm so glad that they ditched the collectathon gameplay for a more action-oriented and story-driven type of game.
But a lot more than the gameplay was improved upon. Like the graphics, first of all. The game looks a lot better, and the new character models allow for a lot more animation, and the new faces allow for a much wider range of emotions to be shown. The new models are a lot smoother and not as jagged. This is especially noticeable with Daxter, whose face isn't painted on anymore. The sound is also more refined than the previous games. It's more crisp and easier on the ears than some of the sounds in the previous game. Kira's voice is a lot better in this one. It's the same voice actress, but it sounds like she gotten better.
And now to move on to the gameplay, which is vastly different from its predecessor, and it's very nice to see that it is.
Gone is the eco that you'd use for combat or puzzle solving, which is nice because it sucks having to work with time limits for a good portion of the game. And having to collect 50 small green eco just to recover 1 out of 3 hit points is ridiculous, especially when it feels like you're getting hit with cheap damage. Instead of getting 3 hit points, you get 8, and health pickups are pretty plentiful, usually finding 1 or 2 in boxes that are scattered across the levels, so you can last a lot longer than you could in Jak 1. And this is needed as there's a lot more enemies than there were in the previous game.
Now the core platforming and melee combat is improved upon. It's a lot smoother and feels more natural and not as loose as the previous title.
While Jak 1 was a little loose when it came to controls, which helped with platforming smoothly, Jak 2 gets rid of that loose feeling and gives you a more natural feel, allowing you to make more precise jumps and attacks. Jak can still do that lunging punch and turn it into an uppercut and a spin attack, and he retains all of his other moves from Jak 1. In addition to melee combat, you get the morph gun, which is nice to have a long-range weapon, but it does feel like it has all the power of a pea shooter in the beginning, but you do get weapon upgrades. In Jak and Daxter, I talked about how the jump and double jump felt like there was a loss of momentum. Well, in Jak 2, they fixed that. Jak keeps the same momentum jumping and double jumping.
So despite the fact that I still can't pan the camera downward, I'm not too worried about my jumps coming up short.
The camera is a little bit more intelligent in this one and doesn't get stuck on things as often as it did in the previous game. Jak 2 doesn't really have that dynamic loading that its predecessor had, but instead it has speed bumps. When you transition from area to area, there's doors that take their sweet time to open. That's this game's version of loading screens. It's a step backwards from the previous game, however, it really does add to the atmosphere of this dystopian city, especially when the doors open and you see how desolate the world of Jak and Daxter has become.
It's not a matter of where they are, but a matter of when they are. And yes, I realize of how much of a time-traveling douchebag thing that is to say.
If you collected 101 power cells in Jak 1, you get a secret ending, where Kira, Samos, Jak, and Daxter are testing out a Rift Rider and Precursor gate. They activate the machine and it ends there. Jak 2 picks up at this moment. A bunch of creatures come out of the portal and the 4 characters are flung through the gate and the Rift Rider is destroyed. Jak and Daxter arrive in a city where Jak is immediately kidnapped and taken to jail. While Daxter escapes, he vows to rescue him before he knows it.
Apparently, before you know it, is 2 years later.
During the time of Jak's imprisonment, he's subjected to dark eco experiments in an attempt to make him some sort of super soldier. Daxter rescues him and they escape the prison and start doing missions for the Underground, a resistance movement dedicated to overthrowing Baron Praxis, who Jak wants to join to get revenge on for being subjected to as an experiment. From here, the game is mainly mission-based, but there's no power cells to collect to progress the story, so you won't be wandering around looking for those stupid things just to get to the next area and to advance the plot. All missions are required to advance the game, even when some of them have no significance to the story, like the jetboard racing.
And the game is extremely unbalanced when it comes to difficulty. This is one of the worst difficulty curves I've ever seen in a game.
The game just spikes and plummets in difficulty all throughout the game. 20 minutes in, you have to blow up an ammunition forest, and it's the 5th mission, and it's a total pain because you see it through the point of view of the machine that's chasing you, making it difficult to judge distances while platforming. You screw up in the slightest, just restart. And the checkpoints are far and few between. I've come close to the end of a mission, died, and then had to start over from the beginning. Then you have to make a delivery to crew, while being chased by the Crimson Guards, and if the zoomer you're on is destroyed, you have to start over again. But after that, the missions get pretty balanced, but certain ones will still jump in difficulty again and again, and some of these missions leave no margin for error.
If there's any failing point in this game, it's the vehicle sections. These are the worst vehicle controls I have ever had the displeasure to use.
The first problem I have with the vehicles is that they feel very floaty. Yes, I realize how stupid of a statement that is considering that all the vehicles are hovercrafts. but there's not much of a sense of control. I found myself hitting the walls constantly and needing to constantly tap the acceleration just to control it, which doesn't help when you're on a time limit or needing to win a race. The vehicle sections in Jak I controlled a lot better, and navigating the city doesn't help with all these small areas filled with tons of other vehicles and Crimson Guard patrolling the area, and they give you missions that you can't skip and have no major importance to the story, and they are vehicle missions that are on a strict time limit. And the Crimson Guard only seem to care when you start the mission, otherwise they don't care at all. I can literally walk into one and nothing will happen, but the second I get on the zoomer, all hell breaks loose. It adds unnecessary and unfair difficulty to a mission that's pointless.
The perfect example of how terrible these sections are is when you have to collect money for crew. This mission needs to be done perfectly.
You have 30 seconds or less to collect bags of money which are scattered about. Why is there a time limit on these? If they've already been sitting there, then why the rush? And why are the Crimson Guard on my tail? They didn't care what I was doing before, and they'll ram into you head on after you hijack a car before you even have a chance to go down to the ground level. And this mission has no significance to the plot. It's something that should be optional, but no, every mission is required to advance through the game. Jak I is actually better in this aspect, as you can put in the bare minimum effort and still complete the game. That power cell too hard to get? Then skip it. But you don't have that option in this game.
You're in a hurry, you really don't have time to be careful, and is it necessary for the vehicles to explode after taking too much damage? Can't they just, not work?
As Jak does various missions in order to defeat Baron Praxis, you'll learn that Praxis is not the true ruler of Haven City, but descendants of Mar are supposed to be the rulers. And Praxis is bribing Metalheads, the main enemy of the game, to attack the city so he can enforce his rule. And that kid that you meet in the beginning of the game is the true heir to the throne. And you find out that the kid is actually Jak, who was sent back into the past with Samos, who is actually the leader of the Underground, to protect and ready Jak for what was to happen to him in the future.
This is a perfect example of a predestination paradox. Jak was always meant to fight Praxis and send his younger self back to the past.
Praxis is killed by Core, who is in fact the main villain and the Metalhead leader. Jak kills Metalcore and everyone celebrates. While it does have some finality to it, Samos hints that there are more adventures ahead. When it comes to terms of how this game has aged, it's aged better than its predecessor. The platforming is much better, but I do find that the roller coaster that is the difficulty to be a hindrance to the fun that I should be having. Some of these missions are just Battletoads difficult. Haven City is huge and desperately needs a fast travel system. It really feels like most of my playtime is just traveling. The game is also extremely linear. You get a mission, travel to the other side of the city, do the mission, go all the way back, get some story exposition, and then a new mission.
I'm not saying that Jak II has aged badly, but it does show its age. It's a little bit better than the first, but how will the entire series stand up when we see the epic conclusion next week?